Hey, everybody. Mark and I have over 20 years of experience as therapists and as addicts in long-term successful recovery. We know better than anyone what works and what doesn't to break out of porn and sex addiction, heal betrayal trauma, and reclaim your relationship.
And we've poured all of our personal and professional recovery and healing experience into a first-of-its-kind program for addicts, spouses, and couples. We call it Dare to Connect.
At least 4 times every week, we engage with you in real time, in the trenches, giving you the knowledge and the tools to take back your life and relationship.
Whatever else you've done on your journey for healing and recovery, you've never done anything like this.
Mark and I, we've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. Don't reinvent the wheel.
We all know tomorrow never comes. Look, don't wait one more day to change. Claim your free 2-week trial today at daretoconnectnow.com.
Hey, everybody. I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSC Squared podcast. Good morning, everybody, and happy holidays from the PBSC podcast. It's Christmas time. We're all super stoked. Nobody can see, but I'm jazzed up with a Santa hat on, so I'm ready to. Yeah, it's good. I'm stoked and ready to go. Looking forward to the break and everything that entails. And I'm actually. It's kind of a good lead into what we're gonna be talking about today, because it is kind of a unique experience for me, to be honest, to look at the holidays in a positive light. For many years, for different reasons that we'll get into, some of which we've already talked about during these last 3 weeks as we've been covering different parts of the holidays and how to navigate them. We've touched on this a little bit, but the holidays for Mark and I have not always been super fun. In fact, I know that we were talking before we recorded this, and maybe some of you share the same sentiment. There are definitely fun times, but it's almost kind of like, geez, can we just survive and get to January, the saddest time of the year kind of thing.
Oh no, my Christmas holidays have always been fantastic.
Oh yeah. Well, never mind. I'm alone in my principles, and Mark has had great Christmases. So there you go. But we wanted to just jump in a little bit with you today, and wanted this to be kind of a Christmas gift of sorts to our listeners. We're going to be reflecting back on, Christmases that were difficult for us personally, and why, and in an effort to relate to some of you. I'm sure you're dealing with some of those same issues, and then talk a little bit about not just how to break out of that kind of in a general sense, but also what worked for us at the time as we were in kind of that critical stage of trying to rebuild and change and grow, and take something that was really hard and painful and start shifting it back to what it ought to be, which is a time of connection and happiness instead of regret and shame and sadness and all those things that too many of us who are fighting this battle with addiction individually and in our marriages on either side of the coin are dealing with. So excited to be here today.
Yeah, Steve and I were talking, and we thought, what Christmas gift could we give to all of our listeners? Because we appreciate all of you so much. We're coming up in January. It'll be a year, right?
Yep.
We've been doing this podcast, and
January 15th, 2020 is when we launched.
January 15th. And we're about to hit our 30,000th listen, 30,000 listens.
Yeah.
Which is just, for us, is amazing. And I think we just passed the 100 countries mark. So
yeah, that is incredible.
We're just so grateful to all of you, and that you actually take some time to listen to what we have to say, which boggles our minds at times. People are actually listening to what we have to say. Steve, what's going on?
It
What
does, and
happened?
and I think I say this all the time, but we just love our listener base so much, and we really do. When we record these episodes, we really do have each of you in mind, and appreciate any feedback and emails that you send us at our contact form on pbsc dot or pbscpodcast.com, and are just grateful for all of you, and want you guys to have a happy holiday season, and to be able to take some of that good in. So yeah, I mean, if we're gonna just kind of jump right into it, um, gosh, let's start with the hard stuff. What?
Ghosts of Christmas past,
Yes,
our past.
Mark. I know that your past Christmases have been great, but go ahead and just make something up about how hard it's been.
Yeah, I don't really have to make anything up. If I were to get raw and real about Christmas in the past, I mean, as a kid, here's the crazy part. As a kid, there was a lot of stuff going on in my home that was very traumatic and abusive in a lot of ways. But for some reason, Christmas time was the reprieve from that.
Yeah.
Everything would kind of come together, at least for a day, where things were pretty good. And so I'm certainly grateful for that. But on the other hand, that created an expectation for me in my adult life as I became a father and a husband and had my own kids. This expectation that Christmas had to be absolutely fabulous, perfect. Everything had to be exactly, in order, all the right gifts and the right environment and the right everything. Because when I was a kid, that was one of the times of the year that I looked forward to as, a break from the madness that
Yeah.
was going on in my environment. So that created some real issues for me. You mix that huge expectation to make sure everyone's happy, to make sure you have a smile on your face, to make sure, everything just goes wonderful. And you try and mix that with addiction,
Oh yeah.
and it's a mess.
Yes.
And I found that for so many years, I would probably have to say decades actually, Christmas was not a very renewing, restful, joyous time for me. A lot
Mm.
of stress, a lot of pressure, a lot of times didn't have the financial wherewithal to really create what I thought in my mind was, the great Christmas for my kids. And so, just scrambling to find, the funds to get those gifts some years. And then, of course, welcoming that lovely credit card bill that comes
Yeah.
about mid-January. Happy New Year. And so it was, Christmas was a real mixed bag for me for a long time. And, I would find very stressful relationship issues that my wife and I had would seem to be magnified or exacerbated during the
Hmm.
holidays.
Yeah.
It can bring out the best or the worst in you.
Yes.
And I found a lot of years that it would bring out the worst. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we could go on and on about that. So yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it is kind of hard to reflect on, but I can relate in a lot of ways for different reasons. I growing up, for me there was less, I guess you would say, family trauma in the sense of like relationships being hard, at least initially. Um, some of my earliest Christmas memories were times when I was, undergoing treatment for cancer, when I
Mm,
was, 8 and 10, and so it was kind of a weird time of a mix of sort of like, oh, is this our last one?
yeah.
And facing that as a little kid, but then
Mhm.
also a mixture of kind of profound gratitude that came with that same time. And then when my dad passed away when I was 12, which happened he died in a plane crash on January 15th
Mm,
of that year. I was 12, and so it was a little ways after the holidays, right? But not really far enough to not taint them. It just kind of was on your mind, especially for that first little while, and those first years were just hard.
mhm.
They were still good. My mom, made every effort possible to. We had really loving neighbors, a kind of a second family that we spent a lot of time with growing up, who we would do Christmas with oftentimes. Like, there was a lot of really good, but it was also just kind of painful. And then
Mm.
it wasn't long after that when I got into addiction.
Yeah, exactly.
13, it was within a year that I was starting to get hooked into addiction, and I was highly shame based at the beginning of it. I went and talked to religious leaders about it. I remember that first time I was convinced I was getting kicked out of my faith. Like it was for sure going to happen. I remember thinking how evil and bad I was, and then that kind of just began that cycle that we've talked about oftentimes of trying and failing and not knowing what I'm dealing with, and more shame, and then even as I got older and got married, that shame and pain kind of took on a new dynamic
Mm,
because I was feeling as a husband, for example, right? It's like, great, now I've dragged my wife into this pain. Now I'm helping to make her holidays hard. What's that going to mean for me and us and, our kids? Like, I got to break free of this thing, but I don't know how. And it was just a very scary time. And I think the only other thing that I would say about that is, and many of you addicts that are listening to this who are recovering can relate. I remember every Christmas, it would be the year where I'd promise myself, I'm like, this time next Christmas, I'm done with this. I am going to be done with this. This is the year that I'm going to be done with this. And I would set out with like such sincere resolve. But the problem was I had no tools. I didn't even have an idea of what I was dealing with, you know.
yeah,
Up until I'd been married almost 9 years, up until that point I didn't even recognize this as an actual addiction.
I know.
And so we were just, kind of trying to move through that, and that hopeless place is hard because we've talked about that cycle, every time we make that firm commitment, be it around a holiday or some other thing, and then when we fall back down or we get knocked back down by this dang disease, it gets just a little harder to get up. And
Hmm.
it's so sad and so hard, and that shame almost kind of builds. And by the time I got to, sort of that year before we really started recovery, it actually was really uh there was just a lot of, it was just kind of a lot of half-hearted, like, yep, I want to be done with this, but I probably won't be. And how many more Christmases will my wife stick around before she's finally going to just be
Right.
done? And I
Well,
mean,
and that's
it's so nice to joke about now, but oh, it
yeah,
sucked at the
really
time.
traumatic because the
Sucked.
crazy part is you take the feeling of Christmas and the holidays, which for many people is very much a spiritual
Hmm.
and really rich religious, time of year. You take all that and then you mix in with it our addiction.
Yes.
And those two don't mix well because
No.
what happens is I felt even a double dose of shame during the holidays, especially Christmas, because I would be acting out. And the reason I
Yeah.
was acting out was because the holidays were so incredibly stressful for me and
Yeah.
created so much, trauma and memories and just all the stuff that went on. That's where I went to self-soothe and cope, when nobody was around. Put on the good smiley face, wear the Santa hat, do and say all the right things. And then when everyone's gone, you collapse in front of your computer and self-soothe and medicate.
Yes.
And that
Yeah.
contradiction is just crazy painful because you feel like the biggest, the most duplicitous, hypocritical, lying, slimy, whatever. Here's
Absolutely.
all this Christmas symbolism and all this stuff going on. And here's what I'm doing in secret. And that
Yeah.
just took the whole stress of the holidays to a whole lower level for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I like how you put that to a whole lower level. No, you're absolutely right. And I think I mean, if we were to kind of sum up the hard part about that is, there is that people pleasing that comes out for all of us addicts as we are codependent in various forms, and there is that pressure to make everyone else happy. But then there is that internal feeling. And looking back, I don't know that I looked at it this way at the time, but probably one of the hard things to still look back on is just how many holidays did I in many respects, not in all, but in many respects, kind of cheat me and my family
Yeah.
out, right? Of
Hmm.
of 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 them being better, because every holiday, I can honestly say I think there were good times every holiday during those dark times. That it wasn't that it was all bad, but like you were saying, you'd have some good experiences and there'd be some good, but it's like the minute that thing ended, the hopelessness would set back in, the pain would set back in. Like you, I would act out inevitably more during this time of year. And so now where I'm at, not only am I feeling that hopelessness and fear and shame, now I'm numb, right? Chemically, I've just
Mm.
numbed my brain out to even
Yes,
feeling anything.
exactly. Exactly.
So, yeah.
Well, and we could depress everyone and tell a whole Christmas sob story for the next 20 minutes, and that
Y-
wouldn't be a very good podcast. So
Yeah, we all probably want to go
we
eat like two pumpkin pies right now, back to back, just to make
with a
that go
gallon of
away.
eggnog to
That's right.
wash it down.
Wash it down with a gallon of eggnog.
So we probably should make a little transition here and actually talk about where you and I are at today,
Love it.
where are holidays today. And they're a whole lot different than
Oh
they
my
were
gosh.
of the holidays of the past.
Night and day different.
Yeah. And so you and I talked about this as we compared notes about, how are they different for us? And, one of the ways for me that's just so huge today is letting go of my codependence, right? This emotional dependence on other people, my spouse, my family, just feeling so enmeshed with them in the past. If they're happy, then I could possibly be happy. If they're down, I'm down, right? This you don't have an individual personal identity in the
Yeah.
past, but today that's really not the case. I find that pretty much if wherever my spouse or family members are, I allow them the space to be there,
Yeah.
right? That's where they are, and I show empathy, and I can connect with them on whatever level they're at. But I find that it isn't the sole determinant of where I'm at, right? This external basically dictating your internal weather all the time.
Yeah.
And I find that in healthy recovery, I've been able to mostly let go of that. And it's such a cool feeling to just go into any environment of the holidays and just be there. Just be fully present is I love, as you said, as we were talking, allowing yourself to feel the holidays, to
Yeah.
feel them, not think your way through them, not focus on how crappy they've been in the past or
Numb your way through them.
numb your way through, but to
Yeah.
feel the whole of what this time of year is about. And there are some wonderful feelings and emotions, um, and some of them painful.
Yes.
And even that part I've come to learn is okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. Well, and that's not all bad, right? We were talking earlier. I may have shared this before, but for me, I was just talking to a client the other day about this. I said to him, I said, you know my history. What would you think was the hardest time for me? Hardest holiday for me, in the recovery process, while I was in it, in the thick of it, early on, later on, where, and I've asked this of clients before, and they usually say, well, geez, I mean, obviously while you're in addiction. And I tell them, no, that's not the case. It was actually years 2 and 3 for me after getting sober. And that had to
Mm.
do with a lot of things, but the biggest reason I think was that by year 2 it was starting, and by year 3, once I had, a really good amount of sobriety under my belt, the full weight and gravity of what this addiction had really been costing me and my wife and my family, I think was really weighing heavy on me. I that year 3, I remember I was doing step 8 and 9, which is making amends with people, which was probably poor timing.
Oh
And
yeah,
so
right.
I mean, there it was rough. I was to the point where it's like I'd be driving home from work, and like a Christmas song would come on, and like by the end of it, like I'm tearing up, and like getting home, and my wife's seeing me as a mess, like, what happened? And I'm like, nothing. I'm like, I'm just so sorry for what I put you through. And she's cutting me off, just like, that was now years ago. Like, we're doing so much better. And like,
Mm.
and it wasn't that the other years were worse or better, because they weren't, right? These were better years, but I was feeling it. It was like I was feeling good things, but then also able to connect with that past. And I was
Yes.
trying to navigate that. And even though it sucked, it was a real blessing, right?
Yeah, because you have to realize that in the years past, and in the addiction years, you were numbing. And while
Totally.
they were incredibly difficult, at least you didn't have to feel, or you chose
Exactly.
not to feel.
You just didn't have to feel anything, at least a
Nope,
lot of the time.
nothing. And now, we try, Steve and I will tell you, we try to allow ourselves to feel everything.
Yeah.
Just let it come in, just sit with it, just be with it. And while it can feel painful, it's just so liberating, because you just feel like you're being you, all of me,
Yeah.
right? All of it. Just and it, I don't know. There's just it's such a to feel deeply is a whole lot different than the numbing out. Hey everybody, Mark and Steve here. Are you looking to take your recovery and your marriage to the next level?
We work with individuals and couples one-on-one.
With both in-person and online therapy options, you have access to the experts anytime, anywhere.
To learn more, visit us at pbscpodcast.com. Well, and we could make a whole podcast about this. Maybe we should. We won't divert too much today, but it's coming up for me as you're talking about that. How that being fully present just leads to so many other things, right? The holidays for me and for you, I'm sure, and for most listeners, were probably filled with, because of, well, obviously they were, right? If we're acting out by definition, this is the case. But there was a lot of avoidance.
Yes.
And being able to be present with like not dreading traditions, right? But looking forward to them.
Yes.
Giving yourself permission to let go. This was a big game changer for my wife and I, letting go of toxic or triggering traditions and setting new ones, right? Are there things that we do around the holidays, either with certain people or in certain situations that lead to that? Again, a good example is when I would, during the holidays, it's kind of going back to that forum podcast we did a few weeks back, it's the holidays. And so what would I do? I just completely let myself go, which, did wonders for my addiction. I would let go in every other way. And then my addiction would be like, cool, we're going to have self-control now. It was just like this weird, crazy Sodom and Gomorrah Christmas party.
I know, right?
And
those become traditions.
They do.
There are the more obvious family traditions, like you get together on Christmas Eve and have dinner, or you all come together and wait till everyone's there to open up your gifts in order. Yeah, those are all traditions, but we invite you to think about maybe some of the traditions over the years that you've introduced into the holiday season that have become traditional, but not what you would typically think of, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it was, a tradition of how many times I would act out, well, Christmas Eve is super stressful. And so I've just gotten done wrapping all the gifts. It's 2 a.m. in the morning. I'm finally able to look to go to bed. And what do I got to do before I go to bed? Well, let's go get a quick viewing session in on the computer.
Sure.
Right? There's just all these different traditions, ways of thinking, ways that, the ways that I approach myself, my spouse, my family.
Yeah.
Take a look at some of the things that have become automatic and habitual for you at the holidays. And perhaps it's time to back away from those, quote, traditions and purposely begin to introduce others that are more healthy, more honest, more authentic, and more joyful.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and you said something interesting when we were getting ready to record. You were talking about how, there's that need and that you've been able to, in some respects, take back some of that kind of childlike wonder.
Yes.
Right. That comes with the holidays, the magic of the season.
Yes.
And I so agree with you there, because even when I was in addiction, I remember the holidays, I used to still look for, even though they were painful at times, I still looked forward to them. This is probably before most of our listeners' time, but I'd get the newspaper ads out and like be circling stuff for Santa and, what do I want and what could he bring and, whatever else. And, I think even absent addiction, I think as adults, it's easy to probably lose some of that without even realizing it. But I think for those of us trapped in addiction or working with a spouse who's dealing with addiction, it can be, even more so. And being able to take some of that back has been kind of the fruit, I think, in many respects, of recovery that's been able to actually filter back in, and wow, this could really be a good Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the thing that I had to find myself doing during the holidays when they became better was, quite frankly, to lighten up. I mean, my wife would be like, Mark, lighten up. You're stressed. You're tense. You're right. It's like, chill out.
Absolutely.
And just invite some of that just fully in the present wonder of the moment, like you did as a kid. Let's invite some of that back in. It doesn't have to be serious. It doesn't have to be so stoic. It doesn't have to be so pent up and pressurized.
Yeah.
Just allow yourself to just be in the magic of the moment. It's okay. It's it's okay. I mean, we've said in a lot of these podcasts that we end up going back to when we were 5 or 6 or 7 years old and how that doesn't serve us.
Yeah.
This may be one of those examples in our podcast where it would be good for you to go back and be that 6 year old.
Yeah.
If that
Yeah.
was, think of the time that was the most magic for you during the holidays, whatever age that was in the past, and transport yourself back.
Yeah.
Take some opportunities to do that.
Yeah, try to capture some of that back. I
Hmm.
completely agree. Well, and I think that there's a lot of things that go into being able to do some of what we're talking about, and one of the big ways I like to kind of put this is building up that emotional bank account so
Yes.
that you can show up authentically and serve and
That is such a great point, right? Because the holidays hit us and we're like, okay, I'm going to be happy. This is going to be successful this time. We're going to get
yes,
along, as if it's just suddenly going to magically happen. And this is why, you and I will tell people over and over and over again, make sure that you're doing the little things on a daily basis going into the holidays and during the holidays. That little meditation time, that little breathing time, that little walk that you go for to get your physical stuff in, the journaling that you do, just those little self-care things, those are what are going to then allow you to be in the moment and to have new traditions and to break out of the old mindsets, because you're making deposits to your own emotional bank account and also to your relationship bank account.
yeah.
So little stuff counts this time of year.
It absolutely does. One, and we didn't even make this as part of our notes for today, but what's coming to mind that I feel like really ought to be said right now is, you know, start practicing. This is so much easier said than done, but start practicing giving yourself permission to enjoy the holidays. You,
Right.
you know what I mean? I remember, I mean, looking back now, how much, as we're talking, I'm sitting here thinking how much of that was self-imposed. There was actually a fair amount of it because even when I
Mm.
was feeling right, what would come to my mind? Dude, you're just an addict. Like, you don't have the right to be happy right now. Like, you're hurting your wife left and right. Like,
Or even if you would start to enjoy yourself, you'd catch yourself and say, what are you
yes,
doing? You're such
yes,
a scumbag. You don't get to be happy. You really
yeah,
think you can enjoy this right now?
yeah, exactly. Your
Right.
your marriage is failing, man. You can't be happy. Like, pull it back.
No, pull it
E-
back.
Ease up on that happiness.
It's so
Ab-
true.
Absolutely. Like we would so get pulled into that, which I think takes us to kind of our insights because I know we could talk about this all day. We really love and care about each of you so much. We want to kind of distill maybe some of the stuff that we learned, kind of capstoning that 3-part session we did about the holidays and navigating them with what Mark and I have kind of found and wish we'd learned before. So hopefully this helps you, like many of our podcasts, not to have to reinvent the wheel so much this year
Hmm.
as we did in the past. So insight number 1 kind of ties in well with what we're talking about. Live in the moment. And when we say live in the moment, it's involving and taking into account that acceptance piece. Let go of the expectations of what the holidays quote unquote ought to be and honor the fact that you're in the place that you're at. The good, right? The hard, what you're doing well, what you're struggling with, because there are both. And it's so easy for shame to cloak all the positive things that might be happening.
Hmm.
Um, if you're in a place where you're on year 2 or 3, like me, for example, of recovery, you're not doing anything wrong. If you're feeling sadness, you're grieving the past, right? Is there some shame in there to work on? Yeah, maybe. But a lot of that is healthy grieving and just recognizing, the past for what it is and kind of reincorporating that. So being able to live in the moment, practicing that, where you are today in your relationship, in your family, in your recovery process, and this is for addicts and for spouses, that is where you are. And it's okay to be there. This Christmas, in some respects, will probably be difficult for some, for random reasons, ranging from the addiction piece to, I'll just say, the kid factor for all you parents out there, because that's a million ways that can go, and family dynamics and all the stuff we've talked about already.
Stuff going
Um,
on in the world. I mean, there's a lot of
yes,
stuff going on this year.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mark, I don't know what you're talking about. There's definitely no political upheaval. and there's definitely no health concerns. So I don't know what anyone. No, it's a scary time for a lot of people for different reasons.
Yeah, not feeling ashamed or guilty if you feel some sadness, if
Yes.
you feel some grief hit you, if you feel a little darkness come upon you. The ability to just sit in that and be with it and just know that this is just what it is. Here's the surprising part about that. If you allow yourself to just sit in that without avoiding, escaping, acting out, self-medicating with the old habits, you'll find that if you allow yourself to feel some of the deeper sad stuff, when the opportunity comes for some of the joyful stuff, you'll also find that you feel that more deeply as well.
Yes.
That's sort of the payoff. That's kind of the payback for allowing myself to kind of sit in the darkness for a bit, because when the light comes, I'm also able to receive that more fully, right? Feeling more deeply is feeling more deeply about all of it.
Yes. It's a great way to put it, and I love that. That is so true. I mean, give yourself permission, really, guys, to celebrate to whatever emotional capacity you have right now,
Mm,
and give yourself permission to let the rest go.
yes.
It's okay not to engage in every family party or every get together or every single dance recital of every single relative or, every single company party. I mean, all those, there's 10,000 things that just pull us a million ways during the holidays. If you don't have that, and this is good advice, whether you're in recovery or not, meet yourself where you're at, have a conversation with your partner and figure out, what do we realistically have the capacity to do? What feels authentic and what doesn't?
Yeah.
And practice letting those things go. Um, and I think along with that, is really, and this is kind of hard to do, obviously, but try to find the hope where you can for the future. Whether that's just a shred or two of it, or whether that's been growing for you this year, or whatever place in recovery that you're at. For me personally, what I love most about this season, it wasn't as a kid, this wasn't the case. I wish it was, but it wasn't. Um, but what I love most about this season is that we are celebrating and being a savior who has taught me and has brought about a miracle in the lives of everyone. That the good news is that I don't have to be what I was yesterday today, and I don't have to be tomorrow what I am today. I am able to change and move forward and grow, and we all are able to do that same thing. And I know that that message is harder to hear for some than for others. I get that as a guy who was very resistant to that message for quite some time. um, but there is hope, there is change. Hopefully one of the reasons that you guys tune in and what you get out of this is, I know a lot of our clients will report this, is it's just half the benefit is being able to see that this really can happen, that you can have hard times, that when hard times do come up, that you can navigate them. My wife and I had a bit of a tiff the other day. As I've indicated on here oftentimes, I wish I could tell you that I do this holiday stuff perfect. I wish we could tell you that. I wish we could just say, hey, here's the list of stuff we do 100% all of the time. And if you just like, it doesn't work that way. But because stuff comes up, life happens. But the more you build the skills about getting back to a good place as much as possible, about forgiving yourself, forgiving others, especially this time of year, I think that leaves us all in a better place to wherever you're at in the holidays, to have it be a little bit better this year than maybe it was last year.
Well, and I love that message of hope, Steve. And that's kind of my final message or gift to our listeners. The wonderful thing for me about I call this time of year the time of redemption. I love Scrooge. I'm a Scrooge fanatic.
Mm,
I've watched, I don't know, I probably have 6 different versions of the movie,
yeah.
musicals and cartoons and all of them, and I just can't get enough because it's all about redemption and
Yes.
change. And I see Scrooge, the character, and I see Scrooge in me, this
So true.
despicable, pathetic, dark, narcissistic, ridiculous character who has no hope. And then suddenly, through this wonderful process that you see in the Christmas Carol, you see him transform.
Yeah.
And I just feel that so deeply in my heart every year as I watch that. And that's really what you're talking about. This is the biggest thing for me this time of year is the message of grace. There
Yes.
is this grace right? Through this miraculous, beautiful, amazing child in a manger, here comes this power of grace that we can
Yeah.
be forgiven, we can move forward, we can be enabled to move forward. I don't have the power to go forward and do this on my own, and I don't have to. That's
Yeah.
that's the amazing part, right? All of the power to do it can be given me, and we see that so much. And so that's our real message, is have hope for the future, because what Steve and I can promise you is, if you will just somehow keep doing the little things, even if you take one step forward and four steps back, you just keep returning to the basic. You just keep returning to the trying.
Yes.
And through those little efforts and this wonderful addition of grace and being enabled, through the love of Christ, you will make it as individuals and couples, one little step at a time. It works. It works. That's the wonder of this time of year, to me, the whole message that stays with me the whole year.
And thank God for that, because it is so great to be able to see that more clearly than we have in years past. We hope that this has been helpful for all of you. I guess part of our Christmas gift apparently today is going way over time. So um hopefully that was a good gift to give.
The gift of abundance, an abundance of Mark and
Yep,
Steve.
apparently. So for those who are still listening, we thank you for your patronage. Thanks for being listeners. Thanks for, most of all, thank you for being willing to do the hard work to work on such difficult things. It is, you really, I think most of our listeners don't really understand how rare it is to face these issues head on. Far too many couples are dealing with similar issues that you are dealing with, but they are dealing with it in a very underground, ignore it, put our head in the sand kind of a way. And we are acutely aware that nobody tunes into this podcast because they've got nothing else to do. Hey, I'll go listen to Porn, Betrayal,
Yeah.
Sex, and the Experts. I got a half hour to kill. What else am I going to do? Like, you guys clearly are wanting something better and wanting to change, and we're just grateful to be a small part of that. So thank you all again, and have a very Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Merry Christmas, everybody.
All right, we'll see you.
That's all for today. Thanks for joining us. And remember, the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. Together, we can do the impossible.
To learn more about Mark and Steve and to listen to more podcast episodes, visit us at pbscpodcast.com. Everything expressed on the PBSC podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.